This is the Office of Career and Professional Development, and welcome to our presentation on interviewing.
Interviewing is simply a two-way process that allows employers to assess your fit to their team, in addition to you being able to learn more about the position and the organization. You are always assessing/interviewing them just as much as they are assessing/interviewing you.
So let's go over the different types of interviews. So first up, we have virtual pre-recorded. These are going to have all different formats, but they're generally timed in a software where the employer has entered questions in there in advance, and they're sending that to all of the candidates, and all of the questions are the same, and you are recording yourself answer those questions. Next up would be a webcam call. So that would mean you're being interviewed by one or multiple people over a software similar to Zoom. Next up is phone, and again, that would just be on whatever phone number you give them, and that could be with one or multiple people. And then we have in person. So this could be one-on-one with physically one person, or maybe multiple one-to-one interviews throughout the day with multiple people that work at that company. Maybe you'll have a panel where there will be multiple people in the room interviewing you at the same time, or even a grad admissions where they have a search committee, and usually it's comprised of faculty of that program. And then a group interview, meaning that you are going to be in a group of candidates that you're all going for the same position and you are interviewing all at the same time.
Research the organization by looking on their webpage and Googling them. What do you see repeated? What words are you seeing? What are their mission and values? Make sure you read through the job posting again thoroughly so you don't ask any questions that were already answered through the posting. It is important to always save the job description somewhere since it will be taken down from their website. Spend some time reflecting on your experiences and what you want the employers to know about you. Create questions to ask the employers. Don't ask anything that you can easily find out from their webpage. Prepare at least 3 to 4 questions to ask each interviewer and rank them in order of importance to you. You should know all the logistics ahead of time, including where to be, when, and who you should ask for when you arrive or call. If these logistics are not provided to you ahead of time, feel free to ask your contact.
Practicing your interviews is key to success and in order for you to feel confident as well. A platform that you can practice virtual pre-recorded interviews is called Big Interview. So if you go to this link, albanyalumni.biginterview.com, and you use any email that you want and you use the code word Damien, you would be able to go in as a UAlbany alumni and practice on this software. This is how some employers and graduate programs are interviewing now, so it would be good for you to practice this virtual pre-recorded style ahead of that actual interview. So when you go into Big Interview, there are different industry questions in there. There's different levels of difficulty that are in there as well. And you can record yourself responding to these and save all of your videos in there. You could send them if you wanted to send it to a mentor or a professor, if you wanted feedback from them on how you did in there. And then next up, just researching questions as well. You can use platforms like jobinterviewquestions.com or glassdoor.com or even Google and type in the position that you're interviewing for or even the employer and then see what comes up in terms of what other people said that they've been asked when they've interviewed for those jobs.
Make sure you are in a well-lit, professional, quiet space. Do not be somewhere with a distracting background. Dress professionally from head to toe. Look into the camera lens and keep any papers at eye level. You want to make sure you're not looking down to read your notes throughout the interview. Do not sound rehearsed. Make sure you close all other apps and silence any sounds or notifications that could pop up on your phone and/or devices. They will either have questions pre-recorded or written out for you to read or play. Some will have you wait only 10 seconds and then you need to answer, and some might only give you 30 to 60 seconds to respond. Some will give you 1 hour to complete the whole thing, and you can redo as many questions as you need to, and some might have some written answers. Whomever the contact is, make sure you notify them that you've completed it and send a thank you note. After this, sometimes they'll do a second round with phone interviews, more virtual, or in-person meetings. In addition to the virtual pre-recorded interviews, when you are in a Skype or a Zoom interview, you still need to make sure you are in a well-lit, professional, quiet space. Do not be somewhere with a distracting background. You want to make sure you are dressing professionally from head to toe. Look into the camera lens and keep any papers at eye level. Do not look down and do not look at the screen. You want to make sure that you are not sounding rehearsed. Make sure you close all other apps and silence any sounds, notifications that could pop up on your phone and/or devices. You should know ahead of time if they are calling you or if you're calling them, or if you are simply joining the meeting. You should also know who is going to be on the call. There might be just one person or many. After this, sometimes they'll do a second round with phone interviews, more virtual, or in-person meetings. Make sure you are sending a thank you note for each person that you meet with, or at the very least, sending an email to your contact thanking them.
So some tips for phone interviews. You do want to make sure that you're in a quiet space with good cell reception. You want to make sure you're closing all the apps on your phone and you're silencing any alarms or sounds or notifications that could pop up on that phone or device while you're using it for the interview. Try not to move any papers around because usually on the other end they could hear you shuffling those around and they might think that you are reading your answers or something like that. If you do have a few papers, maybe like a few notes you wanted to make sure, I really want to make sure I hit upon this, or maybe you have your resume out or a sheet to take notes on or your questions that you want to ask them, make sure it's just a few keywords and reminders and that you have them in one place, that you're not shuffling them around. Your tone is really important for phone interviews because they can't see your facial expression. So you need to make sure that you're aware of your tone to convey your meaning and your interest. If you're talking about something that you're excited about or passionate about, make sure that you sound excited when you're talking about that. With these, in terms of when you're answering these questions, these are typically 30-minute interviews, so you really want to stick to the time frame, but make sure that you're answering all those questions concisely and thoroughly. Now, depending upon the company, it might be shorter. For example, places like Fulbright and Peace Corps, traditionally they have had very short interviews, like less than 10 minutes. And these are very, very direct questions that they're going to be asking you. And the reason why is because their application process is so thorough. So when you get to the point where your interview is wrapping up, make sure that you reaffirm your interest. You ask about next steps in the interview process and what their timeline is. Make sure to always send thank you notes to the person or the people that you interviewed with. For in-person interviews, we're going to talk about what do you actually bring and then what do you do when you arrive. So what do you bring? A Padfolio or a folder, that would be really good for you to bring. You can put in a pen, you can put in copies of your resume, you could bring in questions that you have pre-written out that you want to make sure you ask during your interview. With a Padfolio, these are sold at all stores with office supplies. They come in all different styles. Some of them have a zipper around it, but generally they have a spot for you to put your pen, a spot for you to put papers in, and then they have a notepad that's in there as well. Do make sure that you bring a pen with you, so if you wanted to take notes or if you have to sign anything, that you have that. Make sure you have your resume with you. They should have it already, but just bring some extra copies in case, and you can at least offer it up to show them that you were prepared for that. The amount of resumes would really depend on how many people you're interviewing with. Usually it's safe to bring 2 to 4 copies. And then make sure that those questions, you really want to ask them and you want to make sure that you don't forget them, rank those in order of importance. Don't ask any questions that might have been answered already throughout your interview or during the small talk, but really make sure that you know concretely what this job would be if they were to offer it to you, so that way you could make a sound decision if you would want it or not. In terms of arrival, you only want to arrive 10, 15 minutes in advance, closer to the side of 10. You don't want to get there so early that you are either intervening with another candidate or that you get there so early that they're not prepared for you. So make sure that you turn your cell phone on airplane mode when you're going in. Make sure all of your alarms and notifications are turned off, and then make sure that you turn your phone completely off as well. When you get there, make some small talk with everyone that you meet, especially as you're like on the way to the rooms or you're in between sessions as well. And then remember that you are being evaluated from the moment that you arrive. So please be respectful to any individual that you meet and make sure you thank every single person that you talked with and interviewed with. It's really important that you don't start calling or texting anyone about how the interview went until after you've left the location, because you don't want them to overhear that.
Everyone gets nervous. Nerves just show up in different ways for different people. So we are going to cover some of the most common. If you deal with sweaty hands when you get nervous, try to bring a dry, cool water bottle with you to the interview. Holding on to the water bottle helps to prevent sweaty hands. If eye contact is difficult or makes you nervous, try looking at their nose or ears. This will make it appear as though you are making eye contact, but will hopefully stop those nerves. Be comfortable with pausing and a few moments of silence. It is always okay to gather your thoughts. You can even say something like, "That's a great question. Let me take a second to gather my thoughts." You also want to make sure you are comfortable with them being silent. They could simply just be taking notes. Fidgeting is also a very common way that our nerves present themselves. If this is something that you deal with, try holding your hands. This will prevent you from reaching for the pen and clicking it multiple times or playing with your hair. Posture is also something that can be difficult when we are succumb with nerves. Try sitting up straight in your chair, and if you can, try not to rely on the back of the chair for support. That'll help with creating good posture. Here we have a few images of examples of professional dress. This can include solid, dark, or neutral colored pants, or knee-length skirt suits, long-sleeved dress shirts, or high neckline blouses, clean dress shoes and socks that you can comfortably walk in, with no marks or scuffs, conservative ties coordinated with your suit, belts that match the color of your shoes as well as your attire. Try on your interview attire and make sure it fits properly prior to your interview or event. Always remember to try to dress for the job you want, not the job you have.
So we're going to talk about the types of questions next. So there are three main categories: general questions, behavioral questions, and closing questions. We do have a handout on our website, albany.edu/career, with some sample questions that you might be asked, and then some sample questions to ask the employers, and then a little bit about legal questions as well on that handout. So with general questions in here, these are typically at the beginning of the interview, and this is where the employer is getting to know you, but this is also where you can demonstrate your interest in the position, the organization, and the field in general as well. Behavioral questions are going to focus on direct experiences that you've had, and they will be looking for specific examples in your answers for these. Closing questions are the final questions that they have for you before they start to wrap up the interview. So when you have to answer questions that are being asked of you, the first thing that's really important, and it might seem obvious, but is to listen thoroughly to the question being asked, especially if it's a two-part question. If you do need the employer to rephrase the question or repeat it, that's okay, but make sure you're not doing that for every single question that they ask. In terms of fidgeting, try hard not to fidget with your hands, your hair, your clothes, your bag, your pen. Try not to click your pen, and making sure that you are making eye contact with the person or multiple people that you're interviewing with. If eye contact makes you uncomfortable or if it makes you nervous, you can always look at the side of their face, their nose, or their ear instead, and it might look to them like you are looking at their eyes. When you answer questions, make sure that you are using specific examples. An effective strategy for answering, especially those behavioral questions, is something called the STAR method, which stands for what was the situation, what was the task, what were the actions that you took, and how did this result? So when you're responding, make sure that you are giving a full-fledged answer about this as well, and identifying specific scenarios from your past experiences that could really effectively demonstrate skill sets consistent with the themes mentioned above. You should include examples from past work experience, leadership roles, maybe some research or academic work as well. When you're being interviewed, they will be taking notes on what you're saying, so they might not be maintaining eye contact, or there might be some pauses from when you answer the question between when they ask you the next question, but it's just because they're writing notes.
At the top of this slide, you will find a link to the website for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. You will find a list of all of the protected classes that are prohibited by law to be discriminated against. If you are asked an illegal question, you can say something like, "I'm curious how this is related to the position. Can you elaborate or explain?" You could also try redirecting the question and then providing your answer. For example, if an employer asks if you have any disabilities, you could say, "If you are asking whether or not I can perform these tasks, I can."
You need to prepare questions in advance to ask your interviewers and write them out or type them out ahead of time and bring them with you. If you don't ask questions, they will think that you are not interested in the position or the organization, or that you did not prepare. Make sure you're not asking any questions that could easily be answered by viewing the employer's website or the job posting. Make sure you're not asking questions about salary or benefits. You would need to wait until they make you an offer to discuss those. These should always be ranked in order of importance in terms of your questions. So the first questions you should always be asking is directly relating to the position, so you know exactly what you would be doing in the role and the expectations of the position. Next up, you could ask any questions about the department, the organization, the company, so that way you have a solid understanding of what that company culture is like, what the work is actually like, and what the direction of the company is. Closing questions are any questions that you did not get to ask about. Maybe you would like to ask directly about their experiences or what they really like about working there. And then lastly, to find out what are the next steps in this timeline and the search process. You should thank every single person that you've interviewed with via email. It will set you apart from other candidates. They should be done ASAP and emailed within 24 hours. So you could look at the company website to get people's emails or get their business cards before you leave, or ask your main contact person for people's emails if you can't find it. You could still send a thank you note even if you're no longer in the position. You would just take out one of the sentences that's below. So this is an example. You always put in a subject line, and then this one says, "Dear Mr. Anderson, thank you for taking the time to interview me for the assistant programmer position. I truly appreciated your time in hearing about the organization's culture and your experiences overall. The interview confirmed my interest in the position. I greatly appreciate you taking the time to speak with me, and I look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, Pat Smith." So this line over in here, "the interview confirmed my interest in the position," that's the one sentence that you would take out if you were no longer interested in the job. So when you're interviewing, most of the time you're going to get a timeline in terms of when they say that you'll hear back from them. So if you have not heard back from them within that timeline they gave you, you can always follow up with them. So here's an example of what you could say. "Dear Mr. Smith, I hope this email finds you well. I'm writing to express my continued interest in the marketing coordinator position. I interviewed for this on July 15th. Can you please provide me with an update on the status of my application? Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, Pat Smith."
Sometimes during the interview process, you are not the one to get selected for the job or internship. That does not mean you cannot follow up. You can always ask them for feedback to see which areas you need to grow in to strengthen your chances in the future. Sometimes they may answer, and sometimes they may not be able to give you feedback given their company policies. But it is always worth it to ask. Thank you for joining us during this presentation. Alumni who have graduated more than 5 years ago can contact Alumni Association for career questions and assistance. Their link can be found below.